Hello, welcome to part 3 of the Dyslexia 101 module. Listen, I know this has been a very dense module, and in case you were worried about the length of other modules, please know this is our longest by far. After this, things will start to move a little bit quicker. All right, so at this point, you may be asking yourself, what do I do with all of this information, and what should I do if I suspect someone in my life has dyslexia? If you suspect your child has dyslexia, you need to act. As Dr. Shaywitz mentions in her book, there are very few disorders that mimic dyslexia. So essentially, if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, assume it's a duck. The best course of action is to act while you continue to do your own research and seek a formal diagnosis. I think one of the reasons she mentions this in her book is to empower parents to act. I know in my own journey, I didn't want to act before I had a diagnosis. What I know now, though, is time is of the essence. Um, okay, so the quicker that you act, the quicker you can bridge the gap for your child. Additionally, as I've said before, the Orton-Gillingham method can help every learner, not just those children with dyslexia. So let's say you decide to act quickly, you find an Orton-Gillingham tutor or a program, and then realize your child doesn't have dyslexia. The worst potential outcome is that you provided the best type of reading instruction that you can find for readers of any age. But it is costly though, so that is one potential pitfall. Okay, so you know you need to act quickly, but let's break down what that means. It means you need to get your child evaluated, or what people commonly refer to as tested. What I'm referring to is a comprehensive neuropsychological assessment. This process is as lengthy as it is costly. It's typically performed by a psychologist or a neuropsychologist, possibly even a pediatric neuropsychologist. It includes a battery of tests, which means it's a lot of different tests, and it takes into consideration feedback from parents as well as educators in the child's life. Depending on where you live, this test may or may not be covered by insurance. And if it is covered, it may only be covered partially. Alternatively, some parents may request an evaluation from the school that their child attends. Depending on where you live, the school may or may not be able to diagnose dyslexia, but that may not stand in the way of your child getting the support they need in an academic setting. I will warn you, most often schools don't even want to say the word dyslexia, let alone have a school psychologist on their staff diagnose it. So, testing is one part of the puzzle, right? The other piece of the puzzle are services geared specifically for someone with dyslexia. Even while waiting for a formal evaluation, as I've already mentioned, you can get your child started with Orton-Gillingham based reading instruction, preferably by an OG tutor directly, as in one on one. But at the very least, the child should be taught using an Orton-Gillingham based program that is research and evidence based and followed with fidelity. Let's talk about dyslexia programs as opposed to tutors for a moment. When I say research and evidence based, that simply means that research and practical experience has proven the program effective. Following a program with fidelity means whoever is providing the teaching or tutoring is following the program exactly as it's written. I'll go into a few OG based programs on the next slide. When considering a tutor, make sure they are trained in an Orton-Gillingham based method. There are a few training programs out there as well as certification programs. The best way to see if someone is qualified to teach or tutor students with dyslexia is to familiarize yourself with the programs and certification processes out there. I'll highlight a few popular programs on the next slide. If they follow the programs, you want to make sure that they follow it with fidelity. Can you tell that this is important? It's very, very important. Fidelity is very important. Alternatively, you can ask if they've completed a specific program, and you can usually find the types of certifications or credentials someone would need on your local International Dyslexia Association website, or call them directly to ask what you should be looking for. Um, Ooh, also don't assume because someone has a master's degree in education or a certificate in a reading program that they are trained in Orton-Gillingham based methods. Ask them specifically if they are trained to help dyslexic students using the Orton-Gillingham method. If they don't know what you're talking about, do not use them. Okay, in case this is the first time you've ever thought about hiring a tutor or reading specialist, I want to be very clear here. These types of tutors are expensive. Most children will need no less than 2 one-hour sessions each week, and tutoring can last years, not months. If I haven't been specific enough about what happens when children receive specific OG-based services, the child's brain is going through brain therapy, as in literally changing the structure of the brain in order to read more effectively and efficiently like that of readers who are not dyslexic. To be qualified to do this, it takes time and specific training. So tutors are specialists in what they do. But that also means you are paying fees that are in line with what a specialist should make. An OG tutor that is one-on-one as opposed to a group can cost between $35 to over $100 per hour. Knowing the length of time tutoring takes and the frequency students need it, you can see how the cost can add up. But if cost is an issue, there are other opportunities. Number one, if your child qualifies, you can request the school perform the OG-based instruction that your child needs. Number two, you can buy certain programs and tutor your child yourself. On the screen, I have a few examples of some programs or centers that exist. I'm not going to offer commentary on each because it wouldn't be appropriate to do so based on the fact that I haven't used all of these. I am simply listing the programs that I know parents use or some schools may use to assist children, and that these programs are found to be based on Orton-Gillingham. These do not take into account the various accredited programs that are training programs for parents or teachers that also require a practicum. A practicum is a supervised experience to make sure you are using the principles taught appropriately and correctly. On the left side of the screen, I've kept to those resources that I usually hear more parents talk about than teachers. This is just my experience, so don't be surprised if other parts of the country are different. On the right side of the screen, I have resources that I usually hear schools talk more about or more often. Then there are two at the lower right-hand corner near the middle that are computer-based programs that I've seen both in action, so I listed them here. Barton Reading and Spelling. Both All About Reading and All About Spelling fall under the All About Learning Press. And then Wilson Language Training and Letters Training. These are more geared towards teachers to use in classrooms or small groups. And then there are programs like Lexia and Max Scholar. These are considered to be OG-based. They are, as I said earlier, computer-based programs. There isn't a live tutor or a teacher facilitating the lesson. Also, you may hear of a program called Spires that your school uses. That is also OG-based. There are several. If you aren't sure what your school is using, just ask. So, sorry, going back to Barton and All About Learning, those are primarily done with parents at their homes, or there's a whole online community of Barton online tutors. And Barton, I'm biased, but I love Barton. I use Barton. I believe in Barton. The creator, Susan Barton, who I will introduce you to, I think I already introduced, we'll look at her in a moment if we haven't already. She is so intentional with the way that she built the Barton reading and spelling system. It leaves no rock unturned. She is clear and concise, and it is a powerful program. All About Reading, I've heard wonderful things about. I have never used it personally, but again, it is a OG-based program. And Linda Mood Bell, I know it is expensive. Typically, it is at a center with specialists there who do Linda Mood Bell. But just so you know, Susan Barton was trained in Linda Mood Bell, in addition to a total of 7 programs before she created Barton, 7 Orton-Gillingham based programs before she created Barton. So she's phenomenal. Okay, I briefly mentioned the Orton-Gillingham method. In case you aren't familiar, I wanted to break down why the Orton-Gillingham method is the gold standard in teaching students with dyslexia to read and spell. And boy, do I wish someone would have shared this with me when I first started researching reading programs. Okay, so multisensory. A multisensory approach refers to the senses used when a child is learning material. For example, the child may be asked to listen, repeat, and write what they are learning. This is important because tutors and teachers using this method are quite literally as I've said before, rewiring the brain to make it more efficient and similar to non-dyslexic learners' brains when learning to read. The more senses you use, the stronger the connection made in the brain to what you are teaching. This helps to ensure that the process of reading over time will become automatic, as it is in individuals who do not have dyslexia. For direct or explicit, this refers to students being taught exactly what they need to know in a clear and straightforward manner. Individuals with dyslexia do not intuit anything about written language, so they have to be taught directly and explicitly. There is a science to how someone learns to read, and Orton-Gillingham ensures learners with dyslexia are taught the rules so they can become successful, or the generalizations. I've heard both used, but I say rules. Okay, systematic and cumulative. Concepts are taught in a logical, well-planned sequence and often start with the most commonly used or found in our language, and then they work up to the least common concepts in our language. So, the things that students will encounter most frequently, they learn those first, right? Because we need to really solidify those. And then these least common things where you may not encounter them as often, those can be added towards the end. And just in case you're not familiar, I think it's between 85 to 87% of our language is oh my gosh, my brain just went blank, is like figure outable. It's like, oh my gosh, my brain will not work. You know what? I'll come back to it. Um, this way, so the reason that we do it this way, from the most common to the least common, this way students get plenty of practice with common sounds, syllables, and words in order to master them. Then we have diagnostic and prescriptive. Every individual with dyslexia has unique strengths and challenges. As individuals advance in their educational journey without assistance, they learn coping strategies. Woo, sorry, I'm tripping over my words because I'm going too fast. They learn coping strategies to compensate for weaknesses. OG helps to rebuild reading skills from the ground up, but to do so, we first have to know what the student has learned so we can help them either unlearn and relearn in a way that works well for them, or, learn the first time so that we can do what's right for their brains. The work done with individuals with dyslexia must be specific to them to address their individual needs. Constant monitoring is a must to ensure individuals are getting the material and support they need, and that there aren't any holes in their knowledge. And then the final point I will make is that there is no quick fix for someone with dyslexia to learn to read. If someone tells you they can cure dyslexia or that your child will learn to read in 30, 60, or even 90 days, they are lying. While children can make incredible progress with intensive instruction, it still takes time. For more profound dyslexia, it can take an extremely long time. This isn't a sprint, it's a marathon, and anyone who tells you differently, again, is lying. Tutors and teachers who use the Orton-Gillingham method are literally doing brain therapy. They're rewiring the brain to make it more efficient and effective, to make the reader more efficient and effective. It's brain neuroplasticity, and it takes time. We're working with brain neuroplasticity, and it takes time. Okay, so now I want to introduce you to Susan Barton. She is recognized internationally as an expert in dyslexia. She is in the Hall of Honor at the headquarters of the International Dyslexia Association. Her goal is to help parents, teachers, and others understand dyslexia so they can provide the right type of help. I can't tell you how much her work means to me. She made the unimaginable happen. She helped me teach my son how to read. Her work and her program have proven invaluable in my life and my children's. Susan Barton started her career in the computer field. However, she had a nephew who struggled to read, and after his parents did everything imaginable, including taking him to a vision specialist and various other professionals, they realized he just didn't have the right kind of instruction he needed in order to learn how to read. After being trained in the Orton-Gillingham method, which is the gold standard for teaching students with dyslexia to read, Barton tutored other children and then went on to complete 7, as I mentioned earlier, yes, 7 different Orton-Gillingham based programs. Upon finishing those programs, she picked the best of each and created her own program that is evidence-based and research-based called the Barton Reading and Spelling System. Whew, sorry, I know I'm going fast, but I just want to get you so much information. We've talked about some practical next steps, but what I worry often gets neglected are some personal next steps for parents or anyone trying to navigate this process with a child. First and foremost, let's talk about parent or most often called mom guilt. As a parent who has gone through this process and is still navigating a life that includes 2 neurodivergent kids, if I wanted to, I could fall into a pool of guilt because the guilt that surrounds us isn't a puddle, it's a pool. And at times, it may feel like a lake or an ocean. First, acknowledge all the feelings you may have around your child's potential or actual diagnosis. Don't be afraid of what you feel. They are just feelings. Don't be afraid of what you think. The more you try to push it away or shove it in a box to ignore it, the bigger it gets and the more power it has over you. Also, remind yourself of the amazing job you're doing. Parents are absolutely amazing and they have the hardest job ever. So show yourself some grace because you won't do everything perfect, and neither is any other parent. Remember, dyslexia is not rare. You're not alone, and neither is your child. And on that note, let's talk about finding your people. What I mean by this is don't be afraid to share what you're going through as long as your child is okay with you sharing their challenges. When we share our struggles, we open up the possibility that other people have been wanting to share their struggles as well. In college, one of my professors shared this simple quote: vulnerability begets vulnerability. It means, when we're vulnerable, we allow others to be the same in our presence and feel friendship and support can come out of that experience. And sorry, did I say feel? And real friendship and support can come out of that experience. Not everyone you share with will have the same experience, but I found in my own life that when I share my challenges, often others will share theirs, and a challenge is a challenge. They don't have to be the exact same. Let's talk about educating yourself. What does that even mean? You're in this course now. Isn't that enough? Well, in my humble opinion, it's a tremendous start, but I can only take you so far. I've barely scratched the surface of the amazing information you will find in books and webinars and movies, etc. There are endless resources out there, but on the next couple slides, I'll cover a few that are my personal faves. Before we get to that, I want to remind you of a quote I heard once that really resonated with me. As parents, we are stewards, not engineers. Basically, what this means is that we walk alongside our children on their journey. We can guide them, we can assist them, we can pour our love into them, we can support them on this journey, but we don't create their future. We don't plan their path. We don't build their experience in this thing called life. They are their own individuals. And I think this is important because as parents of children, especially children who struggle academically, it can be tempting to compare our experience to those of others or whatever society says we should be doing, and we may find ourselves trying to push harder to forge a path. But I truly believe that's not what kids need. I say this as a parent. Actually, I say this as a person who worked with hundreds of kids who weren't my own between foster care, K-12, and college. I have to make this distinction because as a parent, I would have never had this amount of objectivity to learn this lesson. It's only in having some distance and working with other people's children and observing other family dynamics that I see how important it is for us to trust our kids and also support them without an actual agenda to build them into a mold of what we think they should be. And here I'm talking specifically about the overall feel of how we approach our kids. I'm not suggesting we let our kids go crazy and raise themselves. I hope that's evident, but I just want to be sure. In addition to 2 books I've already mentioned, actually, I've mentioned a couple different books, but I also recommend the Dyslexia Empowerment Plan. These are the 2 books. Sorry. So I mentioned Overcoming Dyslexia and the Dyslexic Advantage, but I also have 2 other books that I wanted to recommend. So the Dyslexia Empowerment Plan, written by Ben Foss, who has dyslexia. This is a good book that stresses the importance of finding your child's strengths and leaning into those. While he encountered many difficulties with his own diagnosis and he is open about these, he also found tremendous strengths. He also leans heavily on the importance of what he refers to as ear reading as opposed to eye reading. He's more concerned about what our kids are learning instead of how. He's a big proponent of using any resource available to try to alleviate or overcome the challenges of dyslexia. He even talks about his own technology, which he created. And then there's Fish in a Tree. And this book, on the other hand, is a fictitious novel about a girl who has learning difficulties, which we quickly come to realize is dyslexia. What I like about this book is that it helped me think about the experience students with dyslexia have and face. I could also see this as a good audiobook for a tween or a teenager with dyslexia to feel possibly less alone or unseen. Sorry, to feel seen. It would also be a great book for a teen that doesn't have dyslexia to understand what the experience is like. So maybe, there's a loved one that has dyslexia in the family and you want a peer or a sibling to understand it a little bit better. Okay, if you're feeling like you want to go deep into the weeds, I have two other resources for you. I feel like I need to warn you that these are extremely dense books. They are not weekend reads. They are sit down with a pen, paper, post-it, and think a little, read a little, wonder to yourself what, how, why, where, when, and then read a little bit more type of books. Hold on, I'm going to take a drink of water. Okay. Multisensory Teaching of Basic Language Skills is edited by Judith Birch and Suzanne Carricker. This is a collection of chapters written by other authors and then ultimately edited by Birch and Carricker. There we go. This textbook is roughly 700 or so pages and does a deep dive into multisensory teaching and the science of reading. So it should come as no surprise that it's heavy on research and best practices. And when you hear the word science of reading, it's a phrase that's commonly used, and what it's meant to refer or reference is a huge body of research that exists on how individuals and students with dyslexia learn to read. And it crosses multiple disciplines. So it's not just in education, it's also neuroscience and psychology and all over the place. And then next up is David Kilpatrick's Equipped for Reading Success, a comprehensive step-by-step program for developing phonemic awareness and fluent word recognition. This book and the program he outlines in the book is heavy on research, and most of which will blow your mind if you haven't considered the how of how people learn to read and what the brain does when people read. It's almost like I was reading science fiction, if I'm honest. This book is an amazing resource for what are often referred to as Kilpatrick drills, which teachers and tutors will use with students to increase their automaticity, that is instant recognition, whether it's phonemic awareness or within the phonological awareness. In addition to those resources, there is also what is called Learning Ally, and I have the URL on the screen. With this particular source or site, the child would have to have a diagnosis and it would have to be documented. So if either they have an IEP showing that there are reading challenges, or they have an actual, diagnosis from their evaluation. But you would have to upload that in order to get access to Learning Ally. And basically what this resource is, it also costs about, I think, a little north of $100 per year, but it's access to ebooks. And in addition to them just being ebooks, they also read the book and it'll highlight the word as it's reading. So the child can read the book and listen to it at the same time. So it's a multisensory experience. And then there's also Libby. So if Learning Ally is too much, but you want a resource kind of like that, then there's also Libby, and it's through libraries. So if you have a library card, your library has the Libby resource, then you can download the app and you can You can get all kinds of audiobooks, which are great because audiobooks can increase the vocabulary of the student. If they're having difficulty reading themselves, they can still work on their vocabulary and even comprehension through audiobooks. So those are both great resources that we love in our house. Okay, beyond books, there were invaluable resources I came across that were online. At the top of my list is Susan Barton's Bright Solutions for Dyslexia. She has some amazing videos on her website, and her website and free videos were actually the reason I finally realized what was going on with my son. You could easily get lost for hours in her free videos and the site. Another great resource is Dr. Ted Hollowell. Uh, he is a board certified child and adult psychiatrist. He is a graduate of Harvard, a New York Times bestseller. He has a podcast, shares a load of information, and he has a pretty fun and informative TikTok account, which, come to think of it, I haven't seen him post in a while, so I don't know if it's still active. But most importantly, he has dyslexia and ADHD himself. He's a great one to follow if you want a little more information pushed at you on the social media, on social media platforms that you may already be on, as opposed to having to pull all the information, like remembering to go back and, look at different websites and stuff. This way it would just be pushed to you. He's entertaining and the lessons he shares are really great. He also has a great quote that says ADHD is like having a Ferrari brain with bicycle brakes. Strengthen the brakes and you have a champion. Um, the International Dyslexia Association is a nonprofit education and advocacy organization devoted to issues around dyslexia. One of the first calls I made once I suspected that my son had dyslexia was to my local International Dyslexia Association, and they were such a tremendous help. They gave me pages upon pages of resources, and not just nationwide, but also locally, which was phenomenal. Next up is Reading Rockets. It's a national public media literacy initiative offering information and resources on how young kids learn to read, why so many struggle, and how caring adults can help. They bring the best research-based strategies to teachers, parents, administrators, librarians, child care providers, and anyone else that's involved in helping a young child become a strong and confident reader. Next up is Understood. And it's a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping those who learn and think differently thrive at home, in school, and life. They have amazing articles about learning differences, not just dyslexia, but ADHD and many other neurodivergent disorders. And then there's Decoding Dyslexia, which is a network of parent-led grassroots movements across the country concerned with the limited access to educational interventions for dyslexia within the public education system. Decoding Dyslexia aims to raise dyslexia awareness, empower families to support their children, and inform policymakers on best practices to identify, remediate, and support students with dyslexia. Oh, I just realized, so I have Wright's Law, but there's an extra bullet down there. Sorry about that. And then Wright's Law is the resource I've used the least in this list, but have been given by professionals in the field of dyslexia the most. They provide free access to articles, legal cases, training, and resources about special education law and advocacy. I've heard this resource is invaluable, but be warned, I don't find their website to be very easy to navigate. I do think it's important for parents to educate themselves on special education law because our children don't always get the support they need through their schools. And in those cases, it's important to know what the law says about 504s and IEPs. And if none of this makes sense to you, don't worry. In the next module, I will be exploring this topic a little bit more. This is an amazing documentary that is only 44 minutes in length, but it is packed full of really great information. In 2010, a group of parents in a suburban school district near Columbus, Ohio, discovered their children had something in common. They could not read. They were languishing in a reading intervention program, and their dyslexia was not being identified or remediated as required by the federal law under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or also known as IDEA. The group banded together to form the grassroots organization Upper Arlington Kids Identified with Dyslexia. So it was UA Kid. Together, they filed a systemic group complaint with the Ohio Department of Education, and the district was found in violation on all 3 allegations. Then they formed a partnership with the district and now work shoulder to shoulder to deliver the nationally recognized early literacy program they built together. This film was made to offer a roadmap for parents to advocate on behalf of their children. It's phenomenal. I've been focusing on resources, and those are important, but those aren't the only things you need to focus on if you suspect your child has dyslexia. If you are a parent of a child with dyslexia, it is critical to take a look at your expectations to see if they are appropriate or at least focusing on the most important things for your child. Too often, as parents, we get stuck in a trap of what society or our own personal bubble or beehives say that our children should be or do. It's groupthink and unnecessary pressure. Although a dyslexia diagnosis may bring with it a period of grief, in the end, when we shift our perspective, not only can it free us of arbitrary or even very real expectations outside ourselves, but it can also open us up to new positives and strengths that can help balance out the challenges. Most importantly, by shifting our perspective away from this shoulda, coulda, woulda mindset, for example, they should be getting average or above average grades. They should be involved in a lot of extracurriculars, but homework takes up so much time. For example, when we get away from this thinking, we are opening up the likelihood that we'll see our whole child as they are, not as we or anyone else thinks they should be. This shift also brings with it more joy and freedom. The pressure we put on ourselves and our children to perform or to measure up or to achieve to others is unrealistic and frankly limiting. If you are a parent, you have the ability to affect your child's life more than any other individual in their life, especially early on. And it's never too late to see them for who they are sorry. It's never too late to see them for who they are instead of who you think they should be. More than anything, children with dyslexia need to know there is nothing wrong with them, that everything is going to work out. And even if it gets hard, you're always going to be right by their side. Over time, as a way to insulate myself a bit from the monster that we call comparison, I've created a social media presence where I have surrounded myself with positive, uplifting people and parents of neurodivergent kids. I've tried to follow as many people who are smarter than I am about the areas of dyslexia and ADHD, which include researchers and doctors, but also people who are just neurodivergent who share their experiences. I probably follow at least 100 or two, but on the screen are just a few profiles and hashtags that I follow. By surrounding myself with parents who have been where I am and those people who openly share their journey or groups of parents with neurodivergent kids, I feel less alone. And honestly, it's empowering. When we surround ourselves with people who have been where we are, it makes us feel like we too can get through hard times as so many people who came before us have. There's no one way to parent or live a life with children, and seeing all kinds of ways that people live and love their neurodivergent kids and any kid for that matter, as long as they are kind, it helps me break free from the invisible chains of false expectations society seems to have for us. To be completely honest, I'm a much better parent for it. Here are just a few profiles and hashtags that I follow out of the hundreds. So you'll see dyslexia, the hashtag dyslexia, hashtag Orton-Gillingham. Then there's homeschool dyslexia. This is a woman who I think has 7 children, and out of those 7, I think 6 have dyslexia. As if we didn't already know there was a genetic link, huh? The Literacy Nest, she's amazing. She has all kinds of decodable readers, and she's been through a structured literacy program and other trainings as well, as you can probably read on the screen. My Literacy Space, she has all kinds, this is probably more geared towards teachers or tutors, but she has all kinds of neat, creative activities that you can do that are linked to literacy skills. Made by Dyslexia is an amazing resource out of, abroad. I don't know what country, I forget. But they work with Richard Branson, and they were able to create the dyslexia thinking distinction on LinkedIn, which is amazing. And they just have a great Instagram page. Read Aloud Revival. She also does homeschooling, and she also has at least one dyslexic child, and she talks about the importance of reading aloud to children for their vocabulary comprehension and just the benefit of having um, that relationship through books. But she does or I should say, and she does tutoring with her children through All About Reading and All About Spelling. So she has a few, if you're curious about that particular resource that I mentioned earlier in this part 3 of module 2, then you can learn a little bit more on her website. Connor DeWolf he is neurodivergent himself and has amazingly funny videos. DePaul School in Jacksonville, Florida is a school specifically for dyslexic students and has amazing videos as well. And then there's Succeed with Dyslexia, another great resource on Instagram. Okay, and here are a few posts that spoke to me so deeply that I had to share, and I will read them out loud. The real fear that I have for dyslexic people is not that they have to struggle with jumbled input or that they can't spell, but that they will quit on themselves before they get out of school. Parents have to create victories whenever they can, whether it's music, sports, or art. You want your dyslexic child to be able to say, yeah, reading's hard, but I have these other things I can do too. And on the other side of the page, teachers, when you're at graduation this year and your coworkers are crowded around the bubbly, highest achieving students that have all the cords and were in all the clubs, make a point to find that student with the IEP that rarely spoke, struggled with your class, and hit them with the most inspirational words that you can pull out of your well. That child has just climbed their Everest. And man, I cannot agree more. These really struck me because, as I said earlier, we're in the world of people work. It's not a checkbox, it's a person with a beautiful brain and a heart that needs to be handled carefully. It's a huge responsibility, but I think I can't think of anything more important. And I'm sure you agree, no matter if you're a parent or a teacher working with students. Thank you for staying on this journey. Rest up, and I will see you in the next module.